Well, friends, thank you so much to my Liberal and National Party friends and colleagues. Thank you all for that incredible welcome. And thank you so much for the hard work that you're doing every day across the country to win hearts and minds in this incredibly important election campaign. I'm deeply honoured to be here with my family today. Can I also say it's a great honour to be here with three former Prime Ministers, John and Jeanette Howard. I want to say thank you to both of you for what you've done for our party, but what you've done for our country as well. And for me personally, you gave me my first start as a minister, John, and I'll be forever grateful for that. Thank you very much. To Tony Abbott, who restored integrity back into the defence budget and helped protect and strengthen our country. As a minister in your government, I want to say thank you very much, Tony. And to Scott and Jenny, lovely to see you both here as well. And Scott, I'll never forget sitting around the cabinet table with you over the course of COVID, working out how we could help Australians save their businesses and save their lives and livelihoods, and we did that. And there is so much that we can be proud of as a Liberal family, as a coalition family. Thank you all for being here today, and thank you for being here in this very important part of the world in Western Sydney, one of the most important battlegrounds of our election. To the amazing Melissa McIntosh. Thank you. Melissa will be an outstanding minister in my government, and she will be the first ever federal minister for Western Sydney. Can I say thank you very much to David and Amelia Littleproud for being here today. David, thanks to your friendship, thanks to your leadership, and thanks to your loyalty, the coalition is in as strong a shape as it's ever been. And we are ready for government because of that coalition and that relationship. So thank you so much. To Susan Lee, my deputy, as Susan pointed out before, we've been in the Parliament and we've been in different portfolios. We've worked together over a long period of time. Susan's done a fantastic effort over this campaign. So thank you, Susan, for being here today. To all of my parliamentary colleagues today, I'm really grateful for the effort, for the team, for the loyalty, and for what you bring together, and the credible alternative that we are going into this election, an election that we must win. Now, for more than 2 decades, I've had the great honour of representing the people of Dixon in Queensland, and I want to say thank you very much. I have a deep affection, abiding affection for my local community, and I want to thank them for allowing me the great privilege of serving our country in this role and in many other roles over that period of time. Now, our launch today also coincides with the 1-year anniversary after the dreadful stabbings at Westfield Bondi Junction. And in our thoughts and prayers are those who were murdered, and especially those families and their loved ones. My wife, Kiralee, and I, our children, Rebecca, Harry, and Tom, I think we reflect many families around the country. We want a safe environment for our families. We want a prosperous environment where they can achieve all of their dreams. I'm indebted to them for their unwavering support over all of these years, and it's wonderful to have them here today as well. Can I also say thank you to the thousands of Australians who have sent well wishes to my dad, Bruce, who is a bit embarrassed, I think, by all of the attention, but he's well, and we're very grateful for all of those kind thoughts, so thank you. To Australians watching today, thank you very much for your time. In the last 3 years, I've met some amazing and wonderful people right across this great country. Australians living and working in our cities and our suburbs, in our regional towns and coastal communities. Despite hearing so many unique stories, there are common struggles across the country. Australians who are working hard, but who just can't get ahead. Australians who are really hurting from soaring bills and rent and mortgage stress. Australians who can't get an appointment to see a GP. Australians who have seen crime increase in their local communities, and Australians who are just very worried about the future. I want to say to Australians today that it doesn't have to be like this. And there is a clear election choice in front of you. Between, on the one hand, more of the same under Labor, a weaker, less secure and worse off Australia, and on the other hand, the much needed change under the coalition for a stronger, safer and better Australia. This election isn't just about the next 3 years, as you know. This election outcome will define the decades to come. It is, as we've said before, a sliding doors moment for our country. The past 3 years are a good indication of what our future will look like under a returned Labor government in any form. And since coming to power, the Albanese government has lifted spending by a staggering $425 billion. And rapid and unrestrained government spending has weakened our economy. It's meant inflation and interest rates have stayed higher for longer. Under Labor, Australians have only experienced the worst collapse in living standards in the developed world, but we've also experienced the biggest collapse in living standards in our country's history. And Australians feel it in their everyday lives. You're paying more for everything, more for rent, more for food, for a mortgage, for insurance, and certainly for power. Your electricity bill hasn't gone down by $275 a year, as the Prime Minister promised on 97 occasions. In fact, your electricity bill's gone up by $1,300 under Labor. Australians are paying some of the highest power prices in the world under this government's renewables-only policy train wreck, which is causing damage across the economy. Under Labor, a record 30,000 small businesses have gone broke over the last 12 months, a record compared to any previous period in our country's history. And behind every one of those stories, a family has lost their home, lost their savings, lost their dream. There's been a threefold increase in the number of manufacturing businesses which have closed in our country. We've lost the jobs, we've lost the economic opportunity, and now people are just manufacturing in parts of Asia or North America or elsewhere. Anthony Albanese speaks about a future made in Australia, but his government's policies have done the exact opposite. Less is being made in Australia and more is being made abroad. Productivity has fallen by 5.7% under Labor. And the government's also put Australians at risk. Labor has released more than 300 hardcore criminals from immigration detention into the community. More than 1/3 of those that have been released have reoffended against Australian citizens. And the Prime Minister has never apologised for it. Labor's also granted tourist visas, remarkably, to 3,000 people coming into our country from a terrorist-controlled war zone without conducting the requisite security checks. And our country is still recovering from Labor's voice referendum, which cost taxpayers $450 million and sought to divide our country by race and by ancestry. Now, there's been moments in the last 3 years when our country has needed leadership of strength. When Alice Springs was rocked by crime, when anti-Semitism showed its vile face on the steps of the Sydney Opera House, when Chinese Communist Party warships tested their weapons off our coast. They circumnavigated our country, and but for a commercial pilot, the Prime Minister would have known nothing of it. At too many critical points, Anthony Albanese has been too weak, too late, too equivocal, and certainly out of his depth as Prime Minister. Anthony Albanese promised Australians that you would be better off under Labor. So I want to ask you today, do you feel better off after 3 years of Anthony Albanese? Due to Labor's mismanagement, our economy will be burdened with $1 trillion of debt. Debt for the next generations. And that will continue to go up under every budget that is delivered by the Labor Party. The outlook is all red. It's a decade of deficits. Labor has put our economy in an incredibly weak position. And it's at the worst possible time. The tariff war that's playing out internationally could lead to a global recession. It certainly will lead at least to a downturn, and Dr. Chalmers is suggesting exactly that. Australia may not be shielded from any downturn, of course, and that's what history demonstrates to us. And that's because Labor has squandered the opportunity of the last 3 years to strengthen our economy. Now, we are living in a period of great uncertainty, of rising costs and ballooning bills which continue to cause hardship for Australians. There's the prospect of more economic disruption around the world. And there's new dangers posed by emboldened authoritarian regimes. Now, I know Australians are troubled by events at home and abroad. And my message today to Australians is that these challenges provide clarity about what we must do as a nation. We must grow our economy so that we're more protected against external shocks. We must shore up our energy security so that we have an abundance of affordable and reliable power that we need for our future. We must reindustrialise so that we're less dependent on other nations for essentials. And we must strengthen our defence force so that we have the firepower and the capacity to deter any adversary who would seek to threaten us. In short, we must become a more resilient, self-reliant, resourceful and robust country. Getting our country back on track is what we must now do to prepare for the decades ahead. If I'm given the great honour to lead this amazing country, I will make tough and responsible decisions to revive our national self-confidence, to create certainty for our country amid uncertain international times, to set us on a course to achieve the security, the prosperity and the unity that we need as a country. That is my vision. That's my commitment to you, to your families and to our country. The Coalition has a clear plan, a plan to provide immediate cost of living relief to Australians, a plan for stronger, safer and a better future for Australians. And do I think that the Coalition can win this next election? Absolutely I do. We can and we must. Thank you. We can and we must because the future, our children's future, depends on having a good, stable, strong government. And not because we seek to win for winning's sake, or because the political victory is an end in itself, but because we need to get our country back on track. In the spirit of hope and optimism, let me ask you this question. Are you ready to get our country back on track? Now, getting our country back on track starts with providing Australians with immediate cost of living relief. Anthony Albanese's plan is to spend $17 billion of taxpayers' money, of your money, to give you back 70 cents a day, which you'll get, wait for it, in 15 months' time. The Prime Minister has a tin ear, and frankly, Dr. Chalmers, so-called Dr. Chalmers, that tax cut is insulting. Families are under financial pressure now. And we've heard their cry for help. We've met with them, we've sat around kitchen tables, we've listened to their concerns and their angst under this government. And we want to provide help now, not in 15 months' time. Straight away, as soon as a coalition government is elected, we will cut the fuel tax by 25 cents a litre. Our measure is instantaneous and it's effective for every Australian who owns a petrol or diesel vehicle. Every time you fill up, you'll save about $14 or about $750 over 12 months. For a family, you'll save around $1,500 over 12 months. Now, for a family with teenage children, that could cost parents more, of course, to fill up multiple vehicles over the course of a fortnight. It will save those families more money. And that's the story of many families across the country. We want to provide you with support, and we can do it by cutting the fuel tax. We can provide you with that support. And do you know what else we'll do to help Australian families who drive? We'll scrap Labor's car and ute tax. In the Liberal Party, one of our foundational beliefs is in choice. People can choose to purchase whatever vehicle they want in our great country. If you want to purchase an electric vehicle or a hybrid vehicle, that is perfectly within your right to do so, and good luck. If you want to buy a diesel or a petrol vehicle, that is entirely your decision to make. And it depends on whether you live in the city or whether you live in the country or whether you live in remote Australia. And we can provide Australians with that choice, and we'll do it by abolishing Labor's unfair car and ute tax. We'll save Australians an extra $9,700 for choosing a RAV4 hybrid, and an extra $14,400, which is Labor's tax that will be applied to a Ford Ranger, a similar amount to a Toyota Hilux. These are Australia's most popular vehicles, How out of touch can Anthony Albanese be with families and with tradies across the country? This is a demonstration of it. Indeed, we'll save all Australians on Labor's tax. We'll abolish that tax and we'll provide support to families and small businesses across the country. In addition to immediate cost of living relief that comes from fuel tax cuts, Australians also need additional cost of living relief in the near term. Today, I announce a significant tax cut to help Australians who are suffering the most egregious time. And I say that advisedly. When we've spoken with families and sitting around those tables, people really are under stress. So we're going to cut the tax that Labor's imposed, and we're going to help with Labor's cost of living crisis. A coalition government will deliver a one-off cost of living tax offset. This will reduce the amount of tax paid by millions of Australians, and it will be up to $1,200. Around 85% of all Australian taxpayers will be eligible for and will benefit from this reduction in tax. That is... This will help people when they need help. These tax cuts will save families with two incomes as much as $2,400. They will work in concert with our immediate fuel tax cut and with our plan to lower Australians' power bills, which I'll come to. Ultimately, our plan is to get the country out of Labor's cost of living crisis and to do so permanently. To do that, we'll tackle its underlying causes. We'll provide the support now with the cost of living relief, and then we move on to how we can deal with Labor's mess that this government will have to inherit. The Albanese government is the highest spending government in 40 years. Labor is on track to spend $223 billion more per year than during the national emergency of the pandemic. To take the pressure off inflation and to get interest rates down, a coalition government, a government I lead, will rein in inflationary and wasteful government spending. We're not going to proceed with more than $100 billion of Labor's ineffectual measures. But in doing that, we still guarantee investment in essential services and critical areas of the economy like health and aged care, like childcare, veteran support and the NDIS. Addicted to spending, Labor governments always come after more of your money. Under the Albanese government, hard-working Australians have suffered the biggest increase in average tax rates in our history. The average taxpayer is paying more than $3,500 in tax this year alone, or for a dual income family, an additional $7,000. That's the legacy of the Albanese government. Now, prior to this election, Anthony Albanese promised no changes to superannuation. But once in power, as Labor Prime Ministers always do, he introduced a new tax, this time on superannuation. Because Anthony Albanese's word is never his bond. Labor continues trying to tax unrealised capital gains. And there's more bad news. Labor has already been doing other modelling, as we know, and Jim Chalmers is up to his neck in it. He's been doing modelling on capping or abolishing negative gearing and to increase capital gains tax. Now, the Labor Party won't be honest with the Australian public before the election, as they weren't with their Big Australia policy, as they weren't when they promised that they'd bring down the cost of electricity by $275 a year. But the reality is that these are policies which are supported by the Green Teals and by the Greens. The Greens, of course, even want to introduce an inheritance tax. Your super and your retirement savings are at risk if Labor is returned to government in any form. I say to Australians that under a coalition government I lead, we will abolish Labor's super tax. There will be no increase to capital gains tax. There will be no inheritance tax, and a coalition government will always deliver lower, simpler and fairer taxes. Now, as you know, as every Australian knows, tackling the cost of living crisis is also about energy. Energy is the economy. Cheaper electricity doesn't just mean cheaper power bills at home. Cheaper electricity means that it's costing less to grow and harvest food, to manufacture products and goods and less to run businesses and factories. All of those costs at the moment are being passed on at the checkout. Cheaper electricity flows right through the economy, meaning Australians pay less for everything. And that's why Chris Bowen's renewables-only energy policy has been such a disaster. Now, Labor's out-of-control power prices have driven up the cost of everything across the economy. It's why, for example, you're now paying 30% more for groceries when you go to the supermarket. From day one of the coalition government, we will take action to address Labor's energy crisis. Now, not everyone has natural gas at home, but natural gas is critical for our economy. It makes electricity, it runs power plants, and it's used by many businesses and manufacturers. To reduce energy prices for Australians, a coalition government will ensure that Australians have our gas to use here in Australia to bring prices down. We'll immediately introduce an East Coast gas reservation. We'll audit and greenlight new gas development projects right across the country, and we'll decouple the domestic market from overseas markets. As a result of that, the independent analysis indicates that we can reduce the wholesale gas price by 23%. So when we went to BlueScope and we went to Brickworks, and they're talking about paying tens of millions of dollars more each year for electricity and gas under the Labor government, that is just passed on in higher construction costs. We can bring those prices down under our plan, and we can bring prices down across the economy. Gas bills will go down for industrial customers by 15% and for residential customers by 7%. And overall residential electricity prices will go down by 3%, not up by the 32% that Mr Albanese has delivered over the last 3 years. We'll also take steps to shore up our nation's future energy security. If we win this election, Australia will become a nuclear-powered nation. We will take our place. We will take our place alongside the other top 19 economies in the world in adopting proven zero-emissions nuclear power. Our sensible plan, which uses a mix of technologies and has been independently analysed, is costed at 44% cheaper than Labor's renewables-only policy. Mr Bowen and Mr Albanese tell you that it's free, it's all free. But you know on your power bills that that is not true. It is another Labor lie. Our plan is a savings of $263 billion to our country through to 2050. Our plan is cheaper. And if we have cheaper electricity, our prices will come down because there will be fewer costs to pass on to consumers. And with nuclear power, there's no need to carpet our national parks, our prime agricultural land and coastlines with industrial, solar and wind farms or 28,000 kilometres of transmission lines. We also need to re-energise our economy and boost growth. A strong and growing economy means more revenue to fund infrastructure, essential services and defence. Central to boosting growth is restoring smaller government, which gets off people's backs. Our economy has stagnated under the Albanese government's excessive regulation and interference, prioritising the agendas of inner-city Green voters, activists and union bosses, as they always do. Labor has used every tool at their disposal to target sectors that are critical for our economy. It's gone after miners, it's gone after manufacturers, energy producers, small businesses, farmers, fishers and foresters, from Tasmania to Western Australia. And when these industries suffer, we all suffer. My intention is to make Australia a mining, agricultural, construction and manufacturing powerhouse once again. We will defund the activist-led Environmental Defenders Office that stymied projects across the country. And we do that because it's been funded by the Labor Party to stop these projects in Western Australia from going ahead. We'll halve the project approval times and we'll tackle the criminal elements in our building industry. As you know, a criminal operation is ripping off Australians and undermining productivity. They're stalling housing and infrastructure construction across the country, and they're driving up costs. We will put a stop to this modern-day mafia in the form of the CFMEU, and we will deregister that organisation. We will reinstate the building watchdog, which was abolished by Labor when they came into power. Why would they abolish that watchdog, which was keeping the rule of law and upholding that rule of law on job sites? It could have something to do with the fact that $11.5 million was donated by the CFMEU to the Labor Party. And what it's resulted in is a massive increase in the cost that you're paying for a house to be built, for a renovation to take place, for governments to build infrastructure, including hospitals and roads. And we're going to deregister it. As I say, it's a corrupt and crime-infiltrated organisation. It's discredited. And the Prime Minister hasn't had the strength of leadership to stand up against it. We're going to boost growth, and that means backing small business. Under Labor, small businesses have struggled to survive. Behind every small business is a person or a family. And today I say to small business owners and to employees who have been doing it tough, that help is on its way. After the 3rd of May, if we're given the great honour of forming the next government, we will be supporting small business from day one. We've got tax cuts coming, an instant asset write-off of $30,000 on a permanent basis. After 2 years, a deduction of up to $20,000 for business-related meal expenses. That tax relief measure will allow small businesses to take their staff out for a meal to celebrate a work achievement. And it will drive more customers through the doors of our cafes, of our restaurants, of our pubs and our clubs. And many of those businesses have been hit particularly hard by this government. A coalition government will also address critical skill shortages across the economy. To help small and medium businesses put on a new apprentice or trainee, we'll provide $12,000 to help them cover the costs of the first 2 years of training that employee. Our target is to reach 400,000 apprentices and trainees in training across this great country. Economic responsibility also means spending taxpayers' money wisely. Wherever possible, I want to make sure that every dollar spent generates new dollars for the economy. And that's why we've committed more than $14 billion to date towards infrastructure across the nation. The funding for roads, for rail and for transport will create new jobs, generate productivity and attract new investment. John Howard and Peter Costello had our future generations in mind when they established the Future Fund. And the same intergenerational responsibility drives the coalition that I lead. Using 80% of any commodity windfalls each year, we will establish and maintain 2 new funds. A Future Generations Fund to help pay down Labor's debt, fund economic infrastructure, or be drawn on in an emergency. And a Regional Australia Future Fund to develop our regions and improve infrastructure and services. My friends, a better Australia means reviving the hopes of young Australians. Now, in a previous generation, many of us were lucky to buy a home at a young age after we'd worked hard, but that's not possible. That's not the reality for millions of young Australians now. As was pointed out to you earlier, some young Australians are putting off having children. Some parents are staying in the workforce longer. Indeed, some grandparents are, because even though they've saved hard and they've provisioned for their own retirement, they don't have enough money to help their kids with monthly mortgage repayments or to provide a deposit. Australians now well into their 30s are struggling still to buy a home. That's been the Labor legacy. These people have worked hard, they've saved diligently, and too many Australians have been locked into renting forever. Some are moving back into home with their parents, some with their grandparents. I will never accept a situation in our country where a young Australian can only afford to buy a house if they have the assistance of the bank of mum and dad. The Albanese government has made the housing crisis much worse over the last few years. In just 2 years, it brought in 1 million people through the migration program. That is 70% more people coming in through the migration program into our country than at any period in our country's history over that 2-year period. That is quite remarkable. But that's exactly what the government's done, and you knew nothing of it before the Prime Minister was elected. The Big Australia policy that Mr Albanese is rolling out, where 2 million people come in over 5 years, was never explained to the Australian people before the last election. Now, we have a wonderful migration success story in this country, but there's a big difference between controlled, planned and sustainable migration and uncontrolled, unplanned and unsustainable migration. In opening the migration floodgates, Labor has put more pressure on infrastructure, more pressure on services and certainly more pressure on housing. Owning a home is life-changing. And a home isn't just a financial asset. A home provides stability and security. And the benefits of home ownership compound. From the individual to the family, to the community, to the nation. And the Liberal Party has always been about home ownership, affordability, accessibility. And today I bring a message of hope to all Australians seeking to own a home of their own. I will be a Prime Minister who restores the dream of home ownership. Now, first, we'll ease the demand on housing. We'll ban foreign investors and temporary residents from purchasing existing homes for 2 years. We will lower the permanent migration program by 25% for 2 years, and we'll keep it sustainable ongoing. We'll bring the number of new foreign students commencing higher education in our country down by 30,000 each year. And our cap will focus on major metropolitan universities. With these measures, we anticipate that we will reduce net overseas migration in our first year by 100,000 relative to Labor, and will free up 100,000 homes in 5 years through those measures. Homes for young Australians. Rents have gone up by 18% under this government. People, Australian citizens, young and old, are being locked out of housing. Second, we'll increase housing supply. We'll invest $5 billion in essential infrastructure, working with councils, so that we can fund water and power and sewage and road upgrades. This will help get stalled housing projects off the ground and unlock up to 500,000 new homes. And our boost to apprenticeships will lift the number of workers with skills to build our homes each year. Third, we're going to provide the support Australians need for a home deposit. For a first home deposit. Labor wants you to lend taxpayers money, so the government has equity in your home. It wants to make you dependent on rather than independent from the government. Now, I say to the Australian people today that the Coalition has a much better plan. We will allow Australians to access up to $50,000 of their super towards a deposit for their first home. That allows home ownership earlier. And as the asset grows in value, as your home grows in value, so does your ultimate asset position as you get later in life. As you grow older and can put that money back into super when you dispose of that house, you can end up with a house and a good super balance as well. It's an either-or proposition under the Labor Party. Your super ultimately is your money. It's not the government's money. And we'll work with the prudential regulators to ease rigid and overly strict lending criteria. And that will result in tens of thousands more Australians being able to get a home loan. And today I announce a new policy for first home buyers who purchase a newly built property to live in. A Coalition government will allow you to deduct interest payments on the first $650,000 of a mortgage against your taxable income. We will allow these deductions for 5 years, provided you continue to live in that home for that period. This policy will be available to individuals with a taxable income of $175,000 or less and joint applicants earning a combined income of $250,000 or less. When Australians have heard me say that I want to be the Prime Minister for home ownership, for home affordability, for home accessibility, I mean it. And when the Coalition provides leadership to this country, we can transform people's lives in a positive way. I'm not going to allow Anthony Albanese's trashing of the housing market to continue. I am going to make sure, we are going to make sure as a coalition government that we can provide support to young people. It's a different proposition today, as I said before, than it has been for previous generations. The disposable income that's required to service a mortgage, the money that's required to put a deposit down, it's a very different proposition than it was a generation or two ago. And so the announcement that we make today reflects the reality for young Australians. So we will be a government that restores the dream of home ownership for young Australians so that they can get onto the property ladder and that they can have that security as they raise a family, as they use that house to anchor a small business growth. Somebody who has the option now available to them to start a small business in their back bedroom or in their garage. That's what home ownership can mean for millions of Australians, and it is lost under this government. It will be restored under a coalition government that I lead. Ladies and gentlemen, in the last 3 years, the Albanese government's weak leadership and bad decisions have compromised community safety and national security. Crime is a huge issue in many parts of our country, and Anthony Albanese has allowed crime gangs to run riot in many communities. There are many stories that I've heard in Victoria, in Alice Springs, in Western Australia, here in Sydney, right across the country. I have the experience and the determination to strengthen our borders, to slow down the drugs and illegal tobacco, which are the lifeblood of outlaw motorcycle gangs, the biggest distributors of drugs in our country. I will strengthen our laws and provide more funding for our police and intelligence agencies to stop the crime gangs. My focus and strong leadership will make your neighbourhood safer from crime. We will crush the outlaw motorcycle gangs who are peddling drugs to our children, who are then breaking into your home to feed their habit. And it's the bikie gangs. And it's the bikie gangs buying the cars from offenders who have broken into your home to steal the keys of your car. My government will work with states and with the territories, and we will reduce crime in neighbourhoods, in suburbs, in towns, in cities around this great country. Under Labor, the people smugglers have resumed their trade. A coalition government, again, will stop the boats. And under Labor, there are 3 former Prime Ministers in this country who I've learnt a lot from in stopping the boats. We will stop them, I promise you, and we will make sure that we stop Labor's bad policies, providing encouragement for people to hop on boats to come to our country. We do have a great migration program, as I pointed out before, but there's a right and wrong way to come to this country, and we will make sure that we enforce the rule of law. Under Labor, non-citizen criminals and repeat offenders have been allowed to come across our borders, and they've been allowed to stay in our country. The coalition government will cancel their visas and we will deport them. As I did exactly as I did for 6,300 criminals, including murderers, sex offenders, drug traffickers, when I was Home Affairs Minister and the Minister for Immigration. Our country is safer because those people have been deported from our shores, and in particular, women and young girls. I had a particular focus on cancelling the visas of those who had been involved in the most horrific circumstances, perpetrators of domestic violence, people who had sexually assaulted women and children. I had an incredible experience not too far from here, only a few months ago, where after a factory visit, where we were wearing one of the high-vis vests that you may have seen from time to time that we put on. But I walked out of that factory and there was a mother there standing at the front door, and she worked in the factory. And she said, "I just want to say thank you and give you a hug." And I said, "Well, why?" And as she hugged me, she broke into tears. And she said, because you saved my daughter's life. And she said, when you were Home Affairs Minister, you cancelled the visa of her partner. Her daughter had been the victim of repeated domestic violence atrocities. And that loving mother was fearful that her daughter would lose her life. And to me, that was the human face of the decisions that we have to make, the tough decisions that the government hasn't been prepared to make, but that I was prepared to make as Minister and that I'll be prepared to make every day as Prime Minister. Every Australian knows that under Labor, the absence of tough on crime attitude has been seen in youth crime and anti-Semitism as it's spread across our country. A coalition government will provide the moral and political leadership needed to restore law, order and justice. And we'll do other things as well. We'll double the funding for the Australian Centre to Counter Child Exploitation. And we'll develop national uniform knife laws working with states and territories. We'll toughen Commonwealth bail laws to stop domestic violence offenders. And I can promise Australians this too. The coalition government will call out and deter acts of aggressive military activities that threaten our sovereignty and our defence personnel, our country and the region's stability. And we will do this in concert with our partners. Self-censorship is a price no self-respecting democracy should ever pay. And I will always stand up for our national interest. And that's why we will return the Port of Darwin to an Australian government-approved operator. To give you an understanding of Labor's approach, Mr Albanese heard that we were going to make this announcement. And after a couple of wines, it seemed, he called into ABC Radio in Darwin. And he tried to fumble his way through the interview to say what he was going to do, how tough he was, how he was going to take the Port of Darwin back. The trouble for him was that the journalist who took the call knew a little more about the subject than he did. And it started to unravel very quickly. And that interview didn't end very well. And it demonstrated to me, and I think to the Australian public, that this Prime Minister does things on the run. He's always late to whatever needs to be attended to. And he doesn't have the clarity and the vision and the strength for our country that's required to keep us safe. The Albanese government rightly describes these times as the most dangerous and precarious since the end of the Second World War. The Prime Minister doesn't make that statement without advice. And I agree with his assessment. And yet there's no next part of the Prime Minister's sentence. But through his actions, we know that $80 billion has been cut from defence through delays and capability hold-ups and the cannibalisation of some programs to pay for others. It has made us as a people less safe. The Coalition will soon announce a significant investment into defence. We must equip our military at speed and scale. In these uncertain times, that is just not an option. It's a necessary investment in our security, in deterring aggression and in maintaining peace. And only a coalition government can deliver that for today's generation and for generations to come. A healthier Australia is a better Australia. When I was Health Minister, I increased GP training places by 25%. And I established, along with Tony Abbott, the $20 billion Medical Research Future Fund. During the last coalition government, hospital funding went up every year. A coalition government will again deliver quality health care. $9 billion will be invested into Medicare. This includes funding to incentivise junior doctors to work as GPs to address shortages. Subsidised mental health sessions will double from 10 to 20 on a permanent basis. And the pharmaceutical benefits scheme co-payment will be lowered to $25 for cheaper medicines. Women's Health will get a $500 million lift to support better access to services and treatments. And youth mental health, all of those services will get a $400 million lift, including to establish a dedicated national institute. Public hospitals will be backed with a $1.7 billion investment, and bulk billing will be boosted. My friends, under Labor, bulk billing has fallen nationally by 11%. But this is another area where the Prime Minister just hasn't been telling the truth. When a desperate government has so few achievements to speak about, it resorts to scare campaigns. And for the third time in less than a decade, you wouldn't believe it, but Labor is again resorting to a Medi-Scare campaign. If Anthony Albanese lies about something as simple as falling off a stage, there's nothing he won't lie about. The footage was there. People saw it, Prime Minister. People saw you fall off the stage. How can you look people in the eye and lie to them, as you did in relation to the $275, as you did in relation to The Voice? The Voice referendum result was emphatic because Australians stared down their Prime Minister. Australians voted against being divided. They wanted to see practical assistance to Indigenous Australians to improve their lives. A coalition government will start to provide additional support to those Indigenous Australians in a practical way, and a long overdue full audit that will be conducted by Jacinta Price on spending in Indigenous programs so we can help families. We can improve outcomes in health and education. We will identify what's working and what's not. We will reintroduce measures that we know in government worked, in consultation with communities, particularly where drugs and alcohol are prevalent. We will hold a Royal Commission into sexual abuse in Indigenous communities. And we will learn from successful stories like the successful Barker School in northeast Arnhem Land. We have a national duty, my friends, to preserve the innocence of childhood and to nurture young minds in a responsible way. For too long in our country, education standards have been in decline. It's not an issue of funding. We know that under the last coalition government, funding for schools doubled. Commonwealth funding per student has to go up over years and years, and it has. But we're now at a point where we know it's not a funding issue. The issue is what's being taught in our institutions. A coalition government is committed to ensuring that classrooms are places of education, not indoctrination. For our children's future, we want Australia's education system to return to being among the world's best. We've seen promising improvements in schools which are focused on teaching the basics of reading, of writing and arithmetic, and where concepts are explained and practiced. And in that circumstance, young minds can grow. And it's those curriculums that cultivate critical thinking, responsible citizenship and common sense, and reflect the expectations and values of parents that must once again become the norm, and under our government they will. Now, under a Liberal Party that I lead, under a coalition government that David Littleproud and I lead, our government will never be a substitute for parents and for parenting. We believe in the sanctity of parents and the role that they have in raising their children. But in speaking to families across the country, there are a lot of impacts, particularly of social media, on young, impressionable minds. We've worked hard in this Parliament to provide support to families to make decisions about what their children are consuming online, and we've done that work through the Australian Centre to Counter Child Exploitation and others as well. We've also led in the debate about the gambling advertising that our children are subject to during the course of live sporting events. And we intend to take a responsible role in that regard into the future. And we've proposed and I'll make sure that we can do everything we can to hold the social media companies to account, because for many of them, they don't have the best interests of young Australians at heart. We will make sure that those companies abide by the law and that they also don't compromise individual privacy. Every election is about choice, and the choice could not be clearer at this election for Australians. A choice between an enduring cost of living crisis and a weaker economy under Labor, or cost of living relief and a stronger economy under the Coalition. A choice between higher power prices and energy insecurity under Labor, or affordable and reliable power and energy security under the Coalition. A choice between an ongoing housing crisis under Labor or the dream of home ownership restored under the Coalition. A choice between less bulk billing and fewer GPs under Labor, or a return of quality healthcare and more bulk billing under the Coalition. A choice between allowing crime, disorder and drugs to continue to run rampant on our streets under Labor, or a return to law and order under the Coalition. We live in the best country in the world, but our country has gone backwards because of this bad government. Australians can't afford 3 more years like the last 3. This election is about your future. It is about your family's future, and it is about our country's future. It's about who Australians can trust to manage the economy and to keep our country safe. It's about who Australians can have confidence in to create certainty for our country amidst international uncertainty. It's about who Australians know has the plan to set our country on a course to be stronger, to be safer and to be better. I stand before you as a former police officer, as someone who started and successfully ran a number of small businesses, as a parliamentarian and a minister with 23 years' experience across economic, national security and social portfolios. I'm ready to serve Australians as the strong Prime Minister and steady hand our country needs. And I lead a united and capable team. We are ready to govern. This is a pivotal election that will shape our future, a rise or fall moment for Australia. At this election, choose your Liberal or National candidate so that we can course correct the country under a new coalition government. Australians, let's make sure that we can get this great country that we love back on track. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.